Historians of Reddit, what is the biggest fuck you moment in history? Stop sending people to kill me. We've already captured 5 of them, one of them with a bomb and another with a rifle. If you don't stop sending killers, I'll send a very fast working one to Moscow and I certainly won't have to send another. Tito to Joseph Stalin. The Battle of Alicia. Julius Caesar's attacking some Gauls in modern-day France, and they go hide in a castle on top of a hill. Caesar's army isn't big enough to take them all at once, and the Gauls have reinforcements coming, so a siege is impossible. So Caesar just builds a bigger castle around the one he's attacking. He literally just built 2 walls back to back in a ring around the castle. The first Gaul army was already too small to defeat Caesar, and his fortifications only gave him a greater advantage. The reinforcements were also unable to defeat Caesar's army now that he was behind several layers of spike pits and both earthen and wooden walls. Plus the Gauls inside had no way to communicate with the reinforcements outside, so they couldn't coordinate attacks. Both Gallic armies were defeated as they attacked Caesar's newly built fortifications, and Caesar emerged victorious. It's probably my favorite battle of all time. The construction and use of the Werwolf, supposedly the largest trebuchet ever built. When it was disassembled it would fill up 30 wagons. So anyways, King Edward I built this to siege a Scottish castle. But before it was even built the Scottish people tried to surrender. To which Edward responded with a prompt no. In actuality he responded with, "You do not deserve any grace, but must surrender to my will." In other words, I built this trebuchet over 40 days and I'm most definitely going to use it, and proceeded to use the trebuchet anyways. The Second Defenestration of Prague. The Holy Roman Emperor and King of Bohemia sends representatives to the Protestant city of Prague telling them to convert to Catholicism. The representatives get thrown out a window and allegedly landed in a pile of manure. So when France exiles Napoleon Bonaparte, the first time, they didn't think to change out military personnel. So he basically rolls up to the first French outpost he gets to, says sup and begins reassembling an army. By the time he gets to Paris, Hess got enough forces that France is like, well, welcome back. Ferruccio Lamborghini was a rich man owning his company that built tractors. He talked to Ferrari about the imperfections of his car and how to improve them, and they basically laughed at a young tractor mechanic trying to tell them about sport cars, so he decided to start making luxury sport cars to compete with Ferrari, and thus, the rivalry was born. So I'd say the middle finger of this guy to Ferrari was pretty noticeable. https://n.m.wikipedia.org Wiki Olga of Kiev. When her husband died, the country that killed him assumed they'd just take over and force her into marriage. She straight up killed the dignitaries that were sent to tell her she had to marry, multiple times, in the most intense way possible. She then traveled to where her husband had been killed and basically burnt the place to the ground, again, in the most hardcore, amazing way. They made her a freaking saint. Worth the read on Wikipedia. This is already one of my favorite threads in Reddit history. Galvarino http www.bodysoftweek.com Galvarino.html, Chilean warrior who had both his hands cut off by the conquistadors for raising arms against the Spanish. Instead of letting himself serve as a message of helplessness in the face of the invaders, the crazy bastard strapped swords to his stumps and went on the warpath. A pirate known as Jean Liffet had a bounty of $500 put on him by a governor. So he put a $5,000 bounty on the governor. This is more petty, but when Taft bragged to his friends via telegram about scaling a mountain on horseback, that it was a few thousand feet, clear weather, all in all not too difficult, his friend replied, "How is horse?" More weight https://n.wikipedia.org Wikigelis Corey #death by pressing. In the 1970s the small town of Vulcan, West Virginia asked for state funding to replace a bridge into town. The state legislature refused to grant Vulcan the funding they needed. Instead, the town appealed to the Soviet Union for aid. After hearing about the request, the state legislature immediately granted over $1 million for the town to build a new bridge. If a small town in WV asking for Soviet funding in the middle of the Cold War isn't a big middle finger to the state government, then I don't know what is. Napoleon invited his brother-in-law to speak with him before his coronation as emperor to remind the brother-in-law that he objected to Napoleon marrying Josephine because Napoleon would amount to nothing. This requires some background. The Spartans were famously blunt. They were trained to get to the point when speaking, instead of using artsy and beautiful language that would have been common at the time, by being bitten on the thumb if they became long-winded. Now to the meat. Philip II of Macedon, Alexander the Great's father, sent the Spartans a letter saying, "Would you like me to enter your land as friend or foe?" The Spartans responded with one word: neither. Philip was irate. He then sent another long-winded message. "If once I enter into your territories, I will destroy ye all, never to rise again." The Spartans then sent back one word. If. It was like putting your head in a lion's mouth, and I love it. Edit: I was typing in a car. Excuse the typos. Operation Paul Bunyan. https://n.tam.wikipedia.org Wiki Korean axe murder incident. Here's the TLDR if you don't want to read the Wikipedia article. It's 1976. Some Americans at the Korean DMZ are cutting down a tree that obscures their vision to the North Korean side. A couple of North Koreans come out and kill a few Americans with their own axe. The Americans and South Koreans come back with such a massive show of force it's not even funny. Bombers, jet planes, 27 helicopters, a full aircraft carrier moved off the coast. Thousands of troops, troop carriers, commandos, all just to send in a squad of army engineers with chainsaws to cut down that goddamn tree. I would highly recommend giving the forces used part of the Wikipedia article a read. It's riveting and hilarious. Edit: thanks for the silver, fellow appreciator of American awesomeness. Who knew my top comment would be about the most expensive tree cutting of all time? Genghis Khan to Shah al-ad-Din. After the Quraymids plundered one of Genghis Khan's caravans, killed his people, and took his shit, he thought to take the diplomatic approach and send 2 envoys and an interpreter. Shah al-ad-Din decided to be a dumbass about it. He shaved the heads of the envoys to shame them and sent them back with the head of the interpreter. Mr. Khan was kinda pissed, so he marched 200,000 of his boys and ducking annihilated their town with only 14 of that number even able to fight back. He was so pissed at the Shah that he had the rivers keeping the surrounding villages alive fully diverted, so that he would literally wipe al-ad-Din's birthplace off the map and make it so that it was like he never existed. No one would settle there or live there ever again. No one would be there to remember his enemy who had disrespected him. Not even the dogs or cats would be spared, said Genghis Khan. On the crowning of King Henry VII, he backdated his own reign to before the date of the Battle of Bosworth, meaning anyone who was loyal to him now but had shown any sign of opposition at Bosworth was now a traitor and an enemy to the realm. Justice served. French surrender in World War II. Hitler dictates that the French capitulation take place at Compiègne, a forest north of Paris. This is the same spot where 22 years earlier the Germans had signed the armistice ending World War I. Hitler intends to disgrace the French and avenge the German defeat. To further deepen the humiliation, he orders that the signing ceremony take place in the same railroad car that hosted the earlier surrender. The armistice is signed on June 22. Under its terms, 2/3 of France is to be occupied by the Germans. The French army is to be disbanded. In addition, France must bear the cost of the German invasion. The Siege of Tyre. https://n.tam.wikipedia.org Wiki Siege of Tyre 332 BC. Basically, Alexander the Great was unable to capture the city because it was on an island, so he made it into a peninsula to be able to properly attack. It is said that Alexander was so enraged at the Tyrians' defense of their city and the loss of his men that he destroyed half the city. That was a pretty big duck, you tyrant. I love these comic representation. https://j5mo84e01.png of the events by Florkov Cows. Julius Caesar's death. At least he died surrounded by friends. I would say the moment that Rollo swore allegiance to the French king, the bishops present suggested that Rollo kiss the king's foot, as a sign of submission. It was probably an idea intended to humiliate Rollo, and was not taken very well. After some discussion, it was agreed that one of Rollo's men would do it. However, the person chosen lifted the king's foot, and, without bending down, brought it up to his mouth. Not surprisingly, the king fell over, amid general laughter in the court. Following this amusing scene, the king and his men swore to honor the concession to Rollo. https://www.durhamworldheritagesite.com Historienormand's founding Normandy https://www.durhamworldheritagesite.com Historienormand's founding Normandy